So there's two things I want to explain now with regards to font sizing, and that's how fonts are sized and how you can calculate the size of a font on the web. Well, the first thing is CSS allows you basically two types of font sizing, and those types fall into relative and absolute values. Absolute values I'm referring to are things like pixels or keywords. For example, when I look at my CSS rules definition here, under font size, I could select 18 pixels, and I could also, there's also these keywords that are available to me here right now that actually blanks out the actual value over here, and I could use extra large and small, and those are actually relative. I'm sorry, those are actually absolute values. The other way is relative values, which are, you could use things like, let me go 1 EM, which means what the size of the M is, and that's a relative value. And there's also percentage, 1%, but obviously you wouldn't use that. You could use something like 75%. The general consensus is that in most situations, actually if not all, you want to use relative values and not absolute values. I think part of this is because some older browsers like Internet Explorer 6, when you used relative values like EM or percentage, it would allow the text to be resized without really distorting the flow of the layout. And you're going, well, why are people, or who, or why are people resizing text? Well, who, right here, me, I am always resizing text because, I'll go to I don't know, I'll go to Google News and I want to read some kind of news and stuff that it has, and I'm kind of laying back, or I'm laying in bed, or I just don't want to sit there and have to squint at this small print. So I'm always cranking it up and reading it over like this, as opposed to how it usually is. So you really do want to make sure that people have the flexibility to use your site. You don't want to force them to see your text if it's really small. That used to be all the rage for a while. I see it kind of changing now, that people used to use these itty bitty fonts, like 10, 12 point pixel fonts on their website, and it's like, oh, personally, for me, it was torturous because I was always trying to make it bigger so I wouldn't have to stand so close to my monitor and read it. And I don't have bad eyesight. Well, at least I don't think so. Certainly not nearsighted or farsightedness. So, well, with that said, it's best to use a relative font size, but there are methods to use a relative font size but still allow you to fine-grained control, and we'll cover that in another tutorial. The other thing I want to discuss is how to measure font size. And right here I have an example of how a font is. I'm not a typography pro or anything like that, but I have a little bit of knowledge to it. And as we see in this graphic over here, you have the X height, which is kind of the median, and all your fonts are going to have this in the middle. And then above that you have the ascenders. So on top of this H is the ascender, and caps have ascenders too. So most caps won't ever go above this. And then below you have descenders, which, P's, Q's, G's are all going to go down, down this far. When a font size is measured, like if this font was to be 16 pixels, that means that from the top of this S to the bottom of this P are 16 pixels. And that's it. So when you're thinking of your font size, that's how you do the measurement of the font size. Now, sometimes people think, well, why can't I use inches on the web or something like that, or do 16, 16 pixels? Is that going to look the same on everything? Well, that's with referring to someone's resolution. I mean, you can't count on the inches and any of those values, or like millimeters or centimeters, to translate on the web, and you certainly can't count on pixels looking exactly the same on everybody's display either, because think about it. I'm looking at my resolution now, and I have 1440 pixels wide and 900 pixels high. Now, you may or may not have these dimensions. What if your dimensions were 1280 by 800 or 800 by 600? That means that you have 800 pixels wide. I'm sorry, you have 800 pixels wide by 600 pixels height. So that already means that if you're setting a font 16 pixels and physically you have a 10-inch height screen, well, the fonts at these two resolutions are going to look differently. So keep that in mind, that there is certain flexibility and deviations that are going to happen. And when you're trying to control these things, you're doing your best effort within the confines of someone else's system.